The bulldozer's claw was inches from crushing the garage roof when the ground beneath it gave a deep, echoing boom. For a split second, I swear Karen thought she'd triggered an earthquake. I was still in pajama pants, barefoot on the driveway, screaming at the top of my lungs while sirens blared from hidden speakers in the garage walls. The look on her face when a red laser flicked onto her yoga top? Priceless. She had no idea that what she thought was an unpermitted storage shed was actually a federal FEMA command center, complete with biometric locks, satellite uplinks, and underground surveillance arrays that had just pinged Homeland Security. It all started 2 weeks earlier. A pink slip was taped to my mailbox. Not a termination notice. Worse, an HOA violation, signed by Karen DeVille, the HOA's newest aesthetic regulation officer. Apparently, my garage violated the harmony of roof lines on the block. Never mind that it matched my house in pitch, color, and style. Karen just didn't like it. She said it was bulky, intimidating, and not conducive to visual tranquility. I ignored it. I'd dealt with Karen before. This is the same woman who once fined a neighbor over mismatched patio chairs. But she escalated fast. A week later, a second notice was stapled to my actual front door, this time with a $500 fine and a warning that failure to comply will result in forcible correction at the homeowner's expense. I called the HOA office. They brushed it off, said Karen had board support, though no one on the board seemed to know what she was actually doing. Still, I stayed calm. I had the permits. I had federal clearance. I knew what that garage really was. And so, did a very short list of people in Washington, D.C. The garage wasn't built for storing rakes and old bikes. It was a FEMA emergency coordination node, disguised as a normal suburban structure. The upper shell was just a decoy. Underneath sat a reinforced, EMP-shielded bunker, wired directly to FEMA, DHS, and the Pentagon. Drills, protocols, encrypted comms. It wasn't a man cave. It was a nerve center for disaster response. And Karen wanted to bulldoze it because she thought it was an eyesore. That morning, I was jolted awake by a strange rumble. I looked out the window and saw it. A bright yellow bulldozer pulling into my driveway, trailed by a landscaping crew and Karen in her signature peach tracksuit, barking into a walkie-talkie like she was leading a military operation. I sprinted outside barefoot, grabbing my phone and hitting the emergency override app stop. I shouted, waving my arms, "You can't do this." Karen turned and rolled her eyes. "Mr. Holloway, you've been notified. You're in violation. This is federal property." I yelled, "Don't be ridiculous. It's a garage, and it's hideous." I moved to block the bulldozer. The driver hesitated, just enough. Then the sensors in the driveway activated. A mechanical click echoed underfoot. Then came the warning tone. Low, sinister, and then the siren's sharp, blaring pulses from hidden points all over the yard. Red lights strobed from under the eaves. A camera on the roof swiveled toward the bulldozer. Karen froze. What the hell is that? Before I could answer, a robotic voice boomed from a speaker. Unauthorized structural interference detected. Lockdown protocol engaged. Response team en route. Vacate area immediately. Karen blinked like she didn't understand English. Is this some kind of joke? Are you playing sound effects from a speaker? No, Karen, I said, pulling her back. You just triggered a national emergency protocol. But it was already too late. The system flagged a breach. Within 5 minutes, a drone zipped overhead, scanning license plates and faces. Karen shrieked and ducked like it was a UFO. I didn't bother calming her. She brought this on herself. Then came the SUVs. 3 of them. Black, unmarked, tires screeching to a halt just short of Karen's precious bulldozer. Men in tactical suits spilled out, no sirens, no flashing lights. Just purpose and precision. The lead agent walked up, badge flashing. "Ma'am," he said, calm as ice, "you are interfering with a FEMA command site. We need you to step away from the machinery." Karen puffed up like a poodle about to bite. "This is private property. I'm with the HOA." The agent didn't flinch. "That's not how this works. I demand a warrant." He leaned in. "We don't need one." She turned to me. Wild-eyed. You're behind this. What is this place? I told you, I said. It's not a garage. Another siren echoed in the distance. The perimeter had been locked down. One of the agents scanned the neighborhood. Another escorted Karen to the curb. The bulldozer operator jumped out and ran. I'm calling the mayor, Karen shrieked. I suggest you call a lawyer, the agent replied. I finally exhaled. The garage was safe. But the neighborhood? It had just become ground zero for the most surreal HOA overreach scandal the federal government had ever seen. Karen had always been a nuisance, but this? Full-on villain arc. Now she sat in the back of an SUV, arms crossed, flanked by federal agents. The self-righteous HOA queen looked more like a failed Bond villain than someone concerned about roof symmetry. The neighborhood had gone dead silent. Curtains twitched. Phones recorded. One neighbor whispered like he was broadcasting live coverage from a war zone. A mobile ops van had pulled up. Yellow tape went around the block. Karen's bulldozer still idled awkwardly on my driveway, abandoned like a toy in a tantrum. Agent Ramirez handed me a tablet. We're flagging this as an attempted breach on federal infrastructure, he said, scanning the horizon. Did she know what this place was? Not even close, I replied. She just thought it was ugly. He blinked once, then smirked. Well, it's about to get uglier for her. Another agent was questioning Karen. She was still going off, ranting about roofline bylaws and symmetry regulations. The agent just stared at her. Ma'am, he said, you drove a bulldozer onto a federal staging site. This isn't about rooflines anymore. Karen turned to me, desperate. Tell them you'll drop the complaint. We'll let you keep it if you repaint the garage beige. Ramirez chuckled next to me. Yeah, he muttered. She's not walking this one off. She really didn't get it. I shook my head slowly. No, she doesn't. But she's about to. Within the hour, the perimeter was cleared. Karen was released, pending formal charges. They couldn't arrest her just yet. She hadn't quite crossed a legal threshold for immediate federal detainment. But they had everything. Her name, her emails, her footage, and most damning of all, her rented bulldozer. More importantly, they had interest, interference with FEMA infrastructure, even accidental. Isn't something the government just brushes off. Karen thought she was walking away victorious. She was actually walking straight into a meat grinder with $1 million budget and a zero-tolerance policy. Back inside, I triggered a lockdown override and headed down. The staircase curved beneath the decoy garage, leading to a cool, humming control center awash in low blue light. It wasn't massive, about the size of a small apartment, but it was packed. Screens, secure servers, encrypted comm arrays. A place built for a crisis, not clutter. I placed a call to my FEMA handler. After I gave her the rundown, she barely paused. We're flagging this one for the file, she said. I'll dispatch a public affairs liaison. In the meantime, document everything. Do not engage her again. Already done, I replied, forwarding her the drone footage, security logs, and audio recordings. She brought a bulldozer. Thought it was about roofline harmony. A pause, then a sigh. I'm marking this as level 2 civilian escalation. I nodded grimly. I knew what that meant. Level 2 wasn't martial law, but it came with teeth. Federal cease and desist orders, audits, injunctions, and, worst of all for someone like Karen, a full investigation into every organization she touched. That meant the HOA. The next morning, I woke up to another paper taped to my mailbox. This time, it was printed on HOA letterhead. Dear Mr. Holloway, due to recent disturbances and aggressive reactions to community beautification efforts, the board has elected to escalate disciplinary action. You are hereby summoned to a formal hearing next Tuesday. Failure to attend will result in corrective measures. Signed, Karen DeVille, Enforcement Chair. I actually laughed. She hadn't just doubled down. She'd buried the gas pedal through the floorboards. Despite being questioned by federal agents, despite the flashing lights, the drones, the warnings, Karen was still operating like this was her suburban kingdom. And I was just an unruly peasant. I called Ramirez. You're not going to believe this, I said. Try me. She's calling a hearing. He didn't even chuckle. Good. Let her. We're already pulling her digital footprint. If there's even a whisper of premeditation, she's toast. The rest of the week passed in a bizarre fog of tension and whispered rumors. The neighborhood buzzed. One neighbor swore Karen filed permits to expand her backyard using HOA funds. Another said she had a meltdown at the pool because someone brought a towel that wasn't on the approved color palette. None of it surprised me. Karen wasn't just power-hungry. She was hooked on control. The day of the hearing arrived. It was held in the HOA clubhouse, a building designed for bake sales, now repurposed into the local palace of petty tyranny. When I walked in, Karen was already seated at the front, flanked by two board members who looked like they hadn't slept since the Bulldozer incident. A projector glowed in the background. The coffee urn was half empty. The room buzzed with neighbors packed into plastic chairs, most there purely for the spectacle. Karen stood and cleared her throat. Mr. Holloway, we're here today to address your continuous violations and your aggressive behavior toward community standards. I didn't say a word. I just opened my briefcase, pulled out a thick folder labeled evidence, and handed it to the board members. Inside, federal documents, surveillance stills, drone footage, FEMA credentials, a transcript of the automated lockdown warning that blared when Karen's bulldozer rolled in. The treasurer, mid-50s, mild-mannered, flipped through the pages. His face turned ghost white. He leaned in and whispered something to Karen. She waved him off like he was a mosquito. Then she continued, reading from her prepared statement. The garage has not been aesthetically approved and is in direct violation of Section 14, Subsection B. Subsection B doesn't apply to federally sanctioned installations, I interrupted, calm and cold. Karen looked like she was about to combust. That's not possible. This is a private neighborhood. We have rights. No, I said, leveling my voice. You don't. Not over this structure. Not over this property. And especially not when her actions trigger a breach of national security protocols. Security. That one word hit, like a grenade in the room. A long, heavy silence followed. Then clap. Just one. From the back. Another joined in. Then another. Within seconds, half the room was applauding. Karen's face turned crimson. One of the board members stood abruptly. We need a recess. Too late. The genie was out. The power shift had already happened, and Karen felt it in her bones. Her grip was slipping, and the room knew it. She didn't speak, just grabbed her things and stormed out, leaving behind a trail of gasps, whispers, and questions she didn't have answers for. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The storm was finally here, and for once, I wasn't the one standing in the center of it. Karen's dramatic exit didn't go unnoticed. Within hours, video clips were flying through the neighborhood group chat. Someone even added slow-mo dramatic music, and a giant TLB continued. Over the footage, it wasn't just that she'd overstepped. It was that, for the first time, Karen had been confronted by a power bigger than hers, and she was completely unprepared. The rest of the board tried to recover, but watching them was like seeing a three-legged dog trying to win a relay race. Every attempt at control just made things worse. The next day, I got a knock on my door. It was Dale, the treasurer. He looked pale and nervous, clutching a manila folder like it might catch fire. He didn't wait for an invitation. We didn't know it was federal, he blurted. She told us it was some unauthorized man cave. I took the folder. Inside, a gold mine. Email chains. Board meeting notes. Memos. All pointing to one thing. Premeditation. Karen had been pushing for the garage's demolition for months, steamrolling anyone who questioned her, threatening board members with removal, accusing dissenters of being anti-community. One email read, "If we wait for him to move it, we'll never get rid of it. Be proactive. Call in the crew." Clear as day. I looked up at Dale, who was shifting like a kid asking to borrow the car. "Thank you," I said. "You might have just saved yourself from a federal audit." He nodded sheepishly. "We just wanted to keep the neighborhood looking nice." "This wasn't about nice," I said. "It was about control." And she picked the worst hill to die on. That afternoon, FEMA came back, not with guns, but with legal teams. clipboards, case files, a public liaison. They weren't here to arrest Karen. Not yet. But they were laying groundwork for litigation. I gave them everything: video, audio, the HOA documents, Dale's emails. They took special interest in one line where Karen had referred to my garage as a visual terrorist threat to community harmony. The liaison chuckled darkly. That's not just absurd. It's practically poetry. The case grew fast. FEMA invoked the Federal Emergency Management Non-Interference Act, which protected my installation. But that was just the beginning. They found she'd used HOA funds to pay for private contractors without board approval. That bulldozer paid with a community beautification grant that never even passed a vote. One invoice called it landscape correction for non-conforming structure. Now, it wasn't just federal interference. It was financial misconduct. But Karen wasn't done torching her own reputation. She appeared on the local news, standing in front of the HOA clubhouse like she was campaigning for mayor. They're trying to silence community leadership. She smiled into camera. This isn't about garages. It's about power. And I won't back down just because some former government goon thinks he's above the law. The reporter pressed. Were you aware the structure is classified federal property? Karen smirked. I was aware it was an eyesore. That quote went viral for 2 full days. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Old colleagues, friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Even my mom called. I always knew you'd end up on the news, she said. Just didn't think it'd be over a garage war. The city council got involved next. They issued a cease and desist to the HOA, blocking them from taking any further action without official review. That was the final nail. At an emergency meeting, the board held a vote of no confidence. Karen was officially removed. The video of her being escorted out of the clubhouse by a private security officer, still wearing her signature peach tracksuit, quickly eclipsed her previous meltdown in popularity. But even dethroned, Karen didn't go quietly. She began plastering flyers around the neighborhood, accusing me of running a secret government surveillance op. She even filed for a restraining order, claiming I was spying on her bathroom. It was laughed out of court when the judge found out she had sent a bulldozer into a classified structure. Karen wasn't unraveling. She was imploding. A few days later, I got a visit from a former board member, a quiet neighbor I barely knew. He handed me a USB stick. She's been doing this for a long time, he said. The files were stunning. Recordings of Karen berating seniors over wind chimes. Audio of her threatening to sue a teen over a basketball hoop. Dozens of little tyrannies, stacked like bricks in a very small empire. I handed everything to FEMA and the city attorney. They built a dual case, civil and federal. Karen now faced charges for harassment, misuse of funds, unauthorized demolitions, and federal interference. She'd gone from queen of the cul-de-sac to a walking cautionary tale. By the end of the week, the neighborhood felt different, lighter. People started waving, smiling, thanking me. One neighbor baked me a pie. Another offered to mow my lawn. We formed a temporary committee. No bylaws, no fines, no Karen. The air was clear again. But the best part? That Monday, as I returned from a FEMA briefing, I spotted something in Karen's perfectly manicured front lawn. A cardboard cutout of a bulldozer. Taped to it, a speech bubble that read, I bulldozed the wrong guy. I didn't know who did it, and I didn't ask. Because sometimes justice isn't loud or official. Sometimes it's anonymous and petty and absolutely perfect. That night, I stood at my window, sipping coffee, looking out at my garage. Still standing, untouched, secure. Karen's house, once a hive of activity, now sat quiet. No more HOA meetings. No more walkie-talkies. Just stillness. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled, because someone else had underestimated the wrong person. And this time, I wasn't the one dealing with the fallout. It wasn't classified. It was personal and deeply Karen. She may have lost her HOA title, but Karen hadn't lost her flair for delusion. Even after being ousted, served with cease and desist orders, and turned into a neighborhood punchline thanks to her villainous debut on the evening news, she still paraded to the streets like she ran the place. The HOA badge was gone, replaced with a clipboard labeled Citizen Watch, an aggressive red marker. Technically, she had no authority anymore, but that didn't stop her from acting like a self-appointed law enforcement branch. Overgrown lawns, barking dogs, crooked mailboxes, she logged it all, as if her notes might someday matter in court. Even my sprinkler, off by a few degrees for 5 minutes, earned a full-page entry. Highlighted, underlined. Most expected her to retreat in embarrassment. But Karen wasn't a retreat kind of person. She was a go-down swinging on the most absurd hill possible type. And this time, her battlefield was the courtroom. The lawsuit came hand-delivered, jammed into my door like it owed her money. The envelope was absurd, glitter glue, gavel stickers, and a whiff of cheap perfume. Inside, a formal complaint filed with the county. Karen was suing me. Her charges? Harassment, psychological warfare, and my favorite, reputational sabotage through unauthorized federal theatrics. Yes, that's a direct quote. The document, clearly written by Karen herself, was a fevered dream of legal buzzwords stolen straight from late-night courtroom dramas. Gems included, he engaged in surveillance-grade deception tactics, and the psychological cost of garage betrayal has rendered me socially incapacitated. Oh, and she was representing herself. I forwarded the whole mess to FEMA's legal division. They'd been waiting for a move like this. Within 48 hours, not only was her case met with motion to dismiss, but FEMA filed their own suit, accusing Karen of unlawful interference with federal property and misappropriation of HOA funds. She came after me and triggered a multi-agency legal sledgehammer. The first court date was a spectacle. Security guards the door, a packed gallery filled with neighbors, former board members, local media, and even a podcaster from HOA Horrors, Tales from the Cul-de-sac. Karen strutted in wearing a beige pantsuit with linebacker shoulder pads and clutched a binder thicker than a microwave. She greeted the courtroom like a lead actress making her final scene. "Your Honor," she announced, "I come to you not just as a woman wronged, but as a defender of visual peace." The judge blinked slowly. "Is that a legal argument?" Karen pressed on. "My rights were bulldozed as thoroughly as that garage." The judge raised an eyebrow. "So you're admitting you tried to demolish it?" A pause. "What I meant was, it was an aesthetic threat. I had to act." FEMA's attorney stood up calmly. "Your Honor, this is a textbook case of reckless interference. Ms. Karen is not a government employee, yet took it upon herself to demolish a classified federal structure. She was warned. She escalated. And now she faces the consequences." Karen spun toward me and jabbed a finger. "He never told us it was federal." The judge leaned forward. "Because it was classified, Miss Karen." She blinked like someone had unplugged her brain mid-sentence. The courtroom laughed. The judge didn't stop them. FEMA laid out everything. Emails, timestamps, drone footage of Karen sneaking through alleys with binoculars. When they requested a portion of the hearing be sealed for national security reasons, Karen protested loudly. "If I'm being accused of interfering, I should know what I interfered with." The judge agreed to review it privately. 15 minutes later, he returned to the courtroom pale and stiff. "This court acknowledges the structure as a designated federal facility," he said. "The plaintiff's complaint is dismissed." Karen didn't react. Her binder slipped from her hands, papers exploding across the floor like confetti at a loser's parade. Then came FEMA's countersuit. They were seeking $75,000 in damages, emergency response costs, legal fees, and repairs to the site. Karen, stunned, could only stammer, but it was just a garage. The judge didn't flinch. It's never just a garage when you're dealing with the federal government. The story spread like wildfire. Local headlines screamed, "HOA Karen versus FEMA ends in $75,000 loss." Our neighborhood's online map was updated to mark my house with a red that labeled Area 52. Kids started joking that my garage had missile launch codes. Even the mailman asked if I had clearance for interdimensional portals. Later that week, I received a formal letter from FEMA, an apology for the chaos and commendation for my composure. Enclosed was a bronze plaque reading, "Federally secured facility. Violators will be prosecuted or ridiculed, whichever's faster. I mounted it in the command center next to the clearance documents. It felt like a trophy for surviving the most ridiculous standoff in suburban history. Karen, meanwhile, vanished from view. Her once pristine lawn grew patchy. The granite mailbox she bragged about leaned awkwardly like it had lost the will to stand. No more clipboards. No more citations. The HOA had quietly detoxed itself the moment she lost power. A few weeks later, I passed her at the grocery store. She pretended to read the back of a can of beans like it held state secrets. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She'd already become neighborhood folklore. Still, I had a feeling she wasn't entirely finished. Karen was the type who couldn't live without control, even imaginary control over invisible rules. But after everything, she knew better than to come after me again. The community began to heal. Neighbors started hosting block parties. Kids chalked the sidewalks again. Nobody got fined for mismatched patio furniture. The shadow had lifted. All it took was one very persistent Karen and one very federal garage. And the next time someone thinks about starting a war over aesthetics, they'll remember what happened when Karen bulldozed the wrong guy. You couldn't go to the diner without someone quoting Karen's infamous courtroom line. I come to you today not just as a woman wronged. It had become a neighborhood meme. A college radio show even did a full reenactment, complete with sound effects, dramatic music, and a laugh track. Then came the twist no one could have seen coming. I received a formal, sealed envelope from FEMA headquarters. Inside was a letter, official and surprisingly heartfelt. They thanked me for my cooperation, composure, and unshakable calm throughout the ordeal. But it didn't stop there. They wanted me to consult on a new program, training agents on how to handle civilian interference during sensitive operations. The letter ended with a sentence I had to read 3 times to believe. We believe your experience uniquely qualifies you to assist in developing outreach protocols between secure federal installations and the communities surrounding them. Karen's bulldozer tantrum had accidentally earned me a promotion. Of course, I accepted. It wasn't about the money. It was about the poetic justice. She tried to bury me in red tape and humiliation. Instead, she handed me a federal consulting gig. Soon, I was conducting remote briefings, analyzing footage from civilian encounters at restricted sites, advising on de-escalation tactics, and yes, sometimes using clips from my own experience as cautionary examples. I never mentioned Karen by name. I didn't have to. Anyone who saw the footage knew. Back in the neighborhood, something magical happened. The community threw a block-wide celebration. They called it Freedom Fest, a tongue-in-cheek victory party for reclaiming our cul-de-sac. There were food trucks, a bounce house, and a dunk tank featuring a volunteer in a blonde wig, and a peach tracksuit getting repeatedly dropped into cold water. No one said Karen's name, but everyone knew. One neighbor even built a cardboard replica of my garage, complete with fake security cameras and a drone on a fishing line. I laughed so hard I couldn't breathe. But, of course, no story ends that clean. About a month after Freedom Fest, at exactly 2:12 a.m., the underground sensors pinged, minor movement near the rear fence. Curious, I checked the surveillance feed, and nearly spat my coffee. There she was, Karen, crouched behind a decorative planter, wearing a black hoodie and wielding what appeared to be a plastic toy periscope. She was actually using it to peek over the fence like she was in a Saturday morning cartoon. I didn't alert the agents. I didn't sound the alarm. I simply activated the newly upgraded motion-triggered sprinkler system, courtesy of FEMA Tech Division. Whoosh! A silent stream of water blasted across the yard, nailing her square in the face. She shrieked, dropped the periscope, and ran, only to trip, hit the ground, and scramble awkwardly back into the alley. The entire thing was captured on HD camera. I saved the footage in a new folder, labeled it Karen 2.0, The Cold War. The next morning, I found the toy periscope lying in the dirt. I cleaned it, dusted it off, and placed it on a shelf in the bunker, right next to the plaque and framed clearance documents. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Some people just never learn. But the power? That was gone. Karen's influence had shattered. Her clipboard had lost its authority. Now she was just a soggy trespasser chasing the ghost of relevance. She didn't know that her every move was being logged, archived, and stored on encrypted drives for federal review. But I did. A few days later, someone from the community put up a wooden sign near the clubhouse. Warning: premises monitored for federal comedy purposes. Half joke, half warning. Entirely accurate. Karen tried to reappear a few times. Flyers on poles, a weird garage sale where she offered old HOA forms as collector's items. No one bit. No one came. She faded like a B-list actor who finally realized the show had been canceled. I slipped back into my normal routine. Coffee, system checks, the occasional stroll around the block. Sometimes, a new neighbor would ask about the garage, lowering their voice like they were asking about buried alien tech. I'd just smile and say, yes, it's a command center. Yes, it's real. And yes, you can still park a car in there if you know which panel to touch. Their reactions never got old. And so, the garage remained undisturbed, fully operational, quietly humming beneath a normal-looking house in a sleepy little neighborhood. A hidden fortress that had withstood one of the most bizarre threats imaginable. An HOA Karen with a bulldozer and a dream. In the end, she gave me more than headaches and court drama. She gave me clarity, a stronger community, and a government job I never expected. And just between us, I still keep that little plastic periscope on display. Not as a reminder of victory, but as a symbol of what it really takes to win. Not rage, not revenge, just patience, timing, and a perfectly placed sprinkler.